Now that we have the idea of being able to do different plots in different windows, we'd like to see what other things could we add to this. And the first thing is, I should really label things here. I should really label the axes because they mean different things in different plots. So here's a set of code, all calling functions out of that PyLab library. And notice what I've done. First of all, I open up a figure that I'm going to call lin for linear. And the next two calls are putting an X and Y label on that graph. They just take string arguments. So I'm going to say on the x-axis, I want to say sample points. On the y-axis, I'm just going to say linear function. Obvious things to put in there. I then do the plot of my samples versus my linear, as we did before. I can open up, as I did before, another figure, quadratic, and do plotting there. I could open up another figure, which is cubic, and do plotting there. I could open up another figure and do exponential plotting. And then I might decide, you know what, I want to go back to the quadratic figure and add a label. And so notice here, having first created the quad figure there, I've done a few other things. I can come back right here and say, please reopen the quad figure. Calling figure with the same name will do that. And inside of that window, I'm going to add in another label. I'm going to put a y label that is a quadratic function on there. Let's see what happens if we do this. Oh, nice. Now I've got something that labels the x-axis and it labels the y-axis. And oh, wait a minute. Over here, what happened? There's no label on the x-axis. There is a label on the y-axis. Let's go back to the previous slide and see why that happened. Notice that here I put an x and y label, but that was in the linear function, or sorry, the linear window. Down here, when I reopened up the quad picture, I only put a y label on. And that makes sense then. I only said put a y label on there. The label for x happened up here only inside of the linear window, not inside of the quad window. And so if I want to fix that, I better make sure I do the labels inside of the appropriate windows. But there is my display, and it comes out quite nicely. Okay, what else might I do? If I'm really careful about this, I should not only label x and y axes, I should also put titles on these graphs. And so I can do that by simply adding in, after I've done all of these pieces, opening up the figure, doing the plots, I could put in labels. And notice here, I'm reopening up each one of the figures and then putting an appropriate label for the title of each one of these graphs. Great. Let's see what happens when we do that. So there's the display, and there's good news and bad news. The good news is there are the titles for the graphs that I drew. But notice I've still got some labels on the axes. And in that previous code, if I go back to it just for a second, they're not there, right? I'm opening up a figure, I'm plotting, I'm opening up a figure, I'm plotting, and then I'm putting titles on. So what happened here? Why are the axes still labeled? And the other thing you might notice is, why are the colors the same in the two plots? They're both of the same color, even though I'm actually plotting different things. So let's answer both of those. The first answer is, or the answer to the first question is, we're reusing a previously created window. I had done earlier calls where I'd created those windows with those names and I'd done things in them, including putting labels on the axes. So if I want to really be clean, I should clear the window before redrawing in it. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. And the second one, if you're wondering, is why are these plotting functions using the same color? We're going to fix it in a second, but basically we're calling a plot in a new version of a window. And PyLab always starts with the same choice of color, and then we'll move on as we do other kinds of plots. As we'll see, we can control it, but if we don't give any specific instructions, PyLab's always going to start with the same color. Let's deal with cleaning up the windows first. So what I need to do is to say to PyLab, when I open up a figure, in case I've had an earlier version of it open previously, I'm going to in fact clear it. And it's simply going to use the CLF, or clear the frame function, inside of each one. And it's a nice habit to get into. I open up a window, let me clear it to make sure I haven't been using it previously somewhere else, and I have exactly what I want set in order to have a clean slate. Of course, sometimes I may want to use it previously, and in fact, we'll see that right here on this side. When I want to put labels in, I'm reopening that window, and doing the appropriate labeling inside of it. But with that clear, I'm actually going to be able to draw appropriately inside each of them. And when I do that, I get the display I want. Titles in this case on the windows, but nothing on the axes. And I should have said earlier, of course, there were actually 4 windows that were displayed here. I'm just showing 2 of them, the linear and the quadratic. I didn't bother to show to you the cubic and the exponential, but those are going to be things that would also be displayed if I wanted to look at them.